Hello, and welcome to episode 14 of Escape Pod. Today we're joined with Jeremy Alessi, lead developer of the Wii U game Swapfire and what's it called? Midnight Status, I believe?
Yes, good to be here. Thanks for having me.
Not a problem. You're our first game dev. We've had music artists and entertainers, but no game developers quite yet. So,
Ah,
yeah.
Yeah, so we're breaking new ground here.
Yeah,
very cool, very cool.
we try to break
That's
new...
exciting.
Yeah, we try to break new ground every episode. But we appreciate you coming on and giving us your time. I was playing Christian. Have you ever heard of the game Swapfire?
I have heard of it. I've never played it myself, but
It,
I've heard stories.
it's interesting. Jeremy, why don't you fill 'em in?
So I'll start at the beginning. Swapfire was a game jam game originally in 2012, and I got the idea when I saw a tweet from Notch and sort of talking about this 7-day first-person shooter challenge. So a bunch of game developers were going to make first-person shooters that were innovative, and they had 7 days to do it. And as soon as I saw that tweet and I saw innovation in the FPS space, I thought, almost every FPS game, or maybe every FPS game that I could think of up to that point, essentially involved you getting behind cover and then sort of drawing a bead on your opponent and shooting at them. But it was always like protect yourself first and then like try to, get line of sight on somebody. So I thought, well, what would it be like if you had to put yourself in harm's way first before you shot at somebody? And that's the original idea for the game. So the Game Jam game was a kind of a dark theme. Honestly, it looked a lot like Mortal Kombat. There were spinning blades and spikes and all this, but it was fun, and the mechanic worked. You could like jump off the side. You could jump at these blades, and then if you were accurate, and you actually tag somebody, then they would swap, and they would land into that into those blades, or they would fall off the side instead of you, and then you would be safely wherever they were. And this mechanic is still very much present in the Wii U game in the mode called Drop Zone. So Drop Zone is probably the closest to the original idea of any of the modes. And Drop Zone was the very first mode we actually prototyped for the Wii U as well. So in its purest form, I think Drop Zone really captures what it was all originally about. But once we created that mechanic and once we got that working and once we got onto the Wii U also, we really lightened the theme up a lot. And we sort of cheesed it up and brought it into a sort of sci-fi. I'm trying to think how to describe it. It's like a sort of over-the-top announcer that is
like a game show.
Hosting this like American Gladiator style game show for teenagers, or like you might even go back to like Double Dare or something like that. Sort of like a sci-fi American Gladiators Double Dare type thing.
Double Dare is awesome.
I'm sorry, what was that?
Christian,
what was that?
What? I didn't.
I was just saying, Double Dare is awesome. I remember that show from as a kid. It's so good.
Yeah. So all that stuff was, and so with the Wii U game, we did this like lighter theme, and there's a whole bunch of like cheesy humor, and that sort of goes back to thinking about the games that we played when we were younger. There was a lot of times that I personally remember thinking that some of these games were, just super cheesy or super, I don't know, what's the word? People use cringy now. And some of those were like the funniest moments in games.
Yeah.
And so Swapfire sort of throws back to that, but it's also majorly a throwback to Nintendo 64 couch multiplayer gameplay. So with the Nintendo 64, obviously it had 4 controller ports. And that was the first time that it wasn't the first time. And there was multi-tap options for other systems in the past. I mean, going all the way back to the NES, I remember playing 4 players. But
oh yeah,
with the Nintendo 64 though was like the first system to really like so many games supported 4-player, and everybody would gather together and play. And so Swapfire's essentially a throwback to the sort of older games and a little bit of an older style, but it's got this new mechanic. And then the mechanic, once we made Drop Zone and started experimenting with other modes, realized that the mechanic's pretty dynamic and is open to a lot of emergence. So we crafted 9 multiplayer modes broken up into cups. So the cup structure, there are 4 cups. the Quantum Cup all the way up through the universe. And we've got the setup where if you get the gold cup in each one, and it unlocks the next one. If you unlock the Universal Cup, then it'll unlock an exhibition mode where you can just sort of pick and choose which multiplayer modes you want to play. But basically, it's this one swapping mechanic, and then it's used to do a variety of different things. And so some of the gameplay modes are faster paced and more risk reward, like drop zone or race mode. And then others are a little bit more strategic or tactical. Like Control Point is one that I think is heavier on the strategy side.
I was playing the game earlier, and the modes that stuck in my mind were the soccer mode, and I forget what it's called, but there's one mode where you have to stand in the circle and swap with opponents outside of the circle in order to get the points that are inside the circle.
Right on. That's Rally Point. Yeah. So
Yeah, Rally Point's a lot of fun. I enjoyed that, and I do want to say the thing that I admire the most about Swapfire, the ambition of the project, is all the different control styles. You guys managed to make a first-person shooter work with controls with a sideways Wii remote.
yes,
And I,
you hold a Wii remote like a Nintendo controller and twist it to look up and down. That was actually the first technical thing that we tackled on the Wii U. We got a prototype up and running, and it was very apparent early on that with the Wii U, you have a fractured control mechanism, basically a fractured control landscape. And so the Wii remote, I'm sorry, is obviously like the least common denominator. And so we took that and decided, all right, well, if we can make it work on that, then anybody will be able to play the game. And we more or less wanted to make it local multiplayer because those were, first of all, we thought it was something manageable because it's such a small team. I mean, to be honest,
how many people work on Swapfire?
So the people that had sort of like direct input were Henry Meredith and Vince White, Eric Scott, and Adrian Tissot. And those were, obviously we also used, other external assets and things like that, art assets, and not a whole lot of code, but a couple of different code packs that we also leveraged. So we leveraged basically some middleware, but and then of course myself. So I wrote. I would say probably like 90% of the hours were probably mine.
Oh wow!
But other people definitely made some key contributions. But it was I don't want to say it was just a single person project because it wasn't. I definitely had some help.
Right.
But at the end, it was me putting in the 120, 130 hour weeks to actually get the game and to ship it. Which was yeah.
That's a passion project. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's heck. There's about like one day left in the week after that point.
Yeah, no, you when you get into it and you're trying to ship something like that, you will only sleep for a few hours and work, and you barely eat. You won't take a shower. You'll stop exercising. You'll say you put your life on hold to
That's amazing.
to make it.
I respect that.
Yeah,
So
that's mad respect for that. Mad respect.
Yeah, that's amazing. Anybody who's willing to dedicate their passion that much. So I assume that Swapfire became your full-time job?
Yes. So we worked on the Wii U version, so not including any of the time on the Game Jam game, but the Wii U version of the game took 16 months to ship, and
that's still relatively quick.
Yeah, I mean, so we were working on that, and the only other thing, I'm trying to think, let's see here. The other thing that we did during that time was we also built a gaming festival called Pixel Fest. And that was because there was no place to show off our game locally.
So you just made your own convention?
Yes, but we did not intend for it to be that big. We were going to go to SmashCon and MagFest, and we were thinking about maybe going to PAX, but it's very expensive to go to PAX for a developer. So a booth at PAX is, I think, the cheapest thing you can get is $5,000.
Holy shit!
So it's pretty expensive especially if you're trying to ship a game and you have no money, whatever little savings. So I took a big risk on it. And I had 2 kids at the time, and I had a little bit of money saved up, and I had a couple of other forms of income, but nothing huge, nothing crazy. So doing the festival was actually a good thing. and it actually blew up much bigger than we ever anticipated. So we thought that we would do we actually thought we would do a game jam at our local library. We had a new library that opened up, and they had a really nice space up on their 6th floor. And so we went to them and said, "Hey, we'd like to rent the 6th floor and do a game jam, and then maybe like show off our game so that we can build up a little bit of local rapport." And the festival ended up having 4,655 attendees in
Oh my God.
April of 2016. So it
Now, hang on. Did you charge a price of admission?
no, the
Well,
festival itself was free because it was at a library, so it had to be free and
yeah.
open to the public.
I was
But
thinking
about
if you found a way to make it just like $1 per person, you could have bought yourself a booth at PAX.
That's right. Well, the thing that happened though was midway through, we were telling people what we were doing, and a couple of people and companies started to offer sponsorships, and so
That's
we
cool.
we did find a way to make a little bit of money from the festival. This thing's not going to die on me. Can you guys still hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Are you on a phone?
No, I'm on a computer, but it just went to
Okay.
sleep, so I wasn't sure if it was going to cut us off.
No, I
Yeah,
think if
so
the screen goes black, you're fine. I'm not
you're still
sure.
good.
Uh,
Yeah, it seemed to keep running.
yeah, I
Um,
do know that if my computer shuts off, the program I'm using is smart enough, and this has come in handy before, to save what it's recorded so far. So I wouldn't stress too much about that.
yeah, I'm
Because
going to turn my. So yeah. Anyway, that it did end up turning into something that we were lucky. Uh, I wouldn't say that it was something that was profitable, but it was something that generated a small amount of income. And then after we did the festival, and something to know about Pixel Fest is that the idea behind the festival was to grow artists and programmers locally through love of games. And locally is not part of the tagline. It's just growing artists and programmers through love of games. So it was a festival where we wanted people to come in the doors because they love playing video games, but that
Mhm.
maybe while they were there, they would also check out a code boot camp or an art boot camp or a business boot camp and maybe get into game development. So it had an educational slant. And I think that's why the library was interested in it, because the game jam in and of itself was sort of an educational endeavor. So the thing that came after that as well was we got the ability to start doing some paid boot camps afterwards, which helped us get through the summer leading up till the fall, um, when we could when we shipped Swapfire. So that helped get us through that time period. And then also for Pixel Fest, we had developed an app uh, just to show the schedule and where everything was, and we organized this according to the library. So this was a 7-story library in downtown Norfolk, Virginia. And
it's a tall
then we
library.
also ended up getting a small contract to build an app just for the library. And so that gave us our home stretch to finish Swapfire. So we sort of sort of worked our way through the first game by picking up some of these additional things, and that's how we were able to live while we were making the game without doing anything else.
That's really interesting. So the game just made like just enough money to live off of up until launch, right?
The well, those tasks that we performed were sort of the way that we supported ourselves through the development of the first game. And Swapfire, the first game, has not made very much money. It was not profitable in any way,
Well,
shape, or form.
I do want to say at one point in time, and I know you're very proud of this, it was right behind Breath of the Wild in popularity. Not overall popularity, but on the eShop, it was number 2.
Yeah, in terms
Uh,
of number of downloads, yeah, we did what we orchestrated right before we did. Let me think about this. Right before we did Pixel Fest number 2 in 2017,
mm-hmm.
we orchestrated a promotion with Nintendo called the "If you can't switch them, swap them." It was like a giveaway,
Yeah,
and
you made the game free for a while.
yep, we made the game free for about a month between March of 2017 and April of 2017.
Mm-hmm.
And that put us just under Breath of the Wild in terms of total downloads on the store. And so people, I joke about it because I say, well, at least we can give it away successfully. That's a start. So actually, we're doing another free giveaway right now, which
Yeah,
is only the second one we've ever done,
it's
and it
back to
is
being free.
actually Yeah, it's actually the number one game on the store right now, though. So it's
Oh,
sort of it's sort of after the
Oh,
fact. Because no, I don't think there are many people on the Wii U anymore, but
congrats. Well, I still
sort of like
use it.
achievement unlocked,
even
game number one.
even if as just a YouTube box, I do go back to my Wii U every now and again. About once a month, I'll check the eShop and hit new games and see what there is. And they kind of just let anything on the Wii U now. Like
Yes, that's
it's
true.
it's like Swapfire is of quality, but there are some games that just look like in browser games. Like
Hmm.
but
Yeah, they have opened it up. When we became a developer, a registered developer with Nintendo, it was before they had created the new web portal, and they have essentially started to move in the direction of, I think, being a little bit more like Apple and Google with their app stores, where you can just register, and then right now, I believe you can't get all the hardware, but you can some of the hardware you can just go right on and order to be able to do your development and stuff like that. Um,
hmm
but they are definitely, it's more of a walled garden than Apple, and that's that's been one of the challenges with going forward, because when we did the first Swapfire, we released it in November of 2016. We did that promotion in March of 2017, and then we did a Kickstarter for the second game for Switch in June of 2017. And I think that was actually the first Switch exclusive game Kickstarter that was ever created, and it was successful.
that's
But
interesting.
because we're a small game, and the first Swapfire wasn't, it had its moments, but it was not, in the game industry by any stretch of the imagination, a successful game commercially. And so, we're one of the little guys, and we've been on the sort of the back burner, and I'm hoping that Nintendo will approve our pitch. That we've made a pitch for this game on Switch, I don't know, over a dozen times, I think, at this point.
Well,
Um, and
the Switch, the games on there, like again, it's not quite into Wii U territory yet, but there are some Switch games that are of less quality than Swapfire, and I think like Swapfire should have no problem being on the system. Not just Swapfire Season 2. I was wondering, I think in order to gain a new audience, it'd be in your best interest to port the first game over.
it could be. It's interesting. I've been sort of staunch in telling people that the first game was just so designed for the Wii U
Mm-hmm.
that it would be, some parts of it would be easy to port, and others would be difficult.
Well,
And there was sort of a Wii U centric design philosophy behind it. But
right.
um, I would never say never. Let's put it that way.
I'm no game developer, but like I was playing Swapfire earlier in preparation for this interview, and I noticed with all the different controls, there's a lot more potential for the Joy Cons than there would be with the Wii remote. Like now that they have the gyroscope control on both sides of the Joy-Con,
Yes.
you could do sideways Joy-Con play, and it would have like Splatoon controls.
Yep. Yes, definitely. Yeah, we're also experimenting, or we're talking. So we already experimented with third person. I think that's one of the other issues with the first game that came up a lot. It was a request at the very least, and we did experiment with third person there as well as with Splatoon style controls. But we felt that the with the art direction that we took with the first game, and really going with a sort of limited style and limited character models, that we couldn't do a third person camera justice, because our characters, we just felt, were a little too stiff, and we didn't have the resources to really invest in that. And so, although it worked mechanically for the most part, what we're looking at now with the second game, now that we have somebody as well that's sort of joined our mission, who's a really great AAA artist, Damond Rogers. And so he's helped us with the art on the Kickstarter, and he's also very interested to help, and he's working on some stuff right now for Swapfire 2.
Was he behind the really good looking 3D models you guys have on for Swapfire 2 now?
Yes, yes.
Those are
So
really good 3D models, I
yes,
will say.
Damond is an amazing person, an amazing artist. I met him in 2012. I went down to Raleigh, North Carolina, to East Coast Games Conference, East Coast Game Developers Conference. No, it's East Coast Games Conference is what it's called. I think Game Developers Conference is a trademark thing. But anyway, we were, hanging out. I was hanging out with a couple of other developers in a bar and, talking to different people and stuff. And Demond, came up and started chatting. And he was showing off Nintendo game console prototypes that he had 3D modeled. And he was also showing off a new game that he was working on called Lily. And so it, immediately caught my attention because it was beautiful and he was a huge Nintendo fan.
You said game console 3D models. Was it like early prototypes of the Switch or something?
Well, it was just stuff that he was making for fun, not
okay. So it was like
not anything, legitimate. It was just concepts that he was coming up with, as if he was the one designing Nintendo game consoles. This is what they would look like.
Okay.
And they were awesome, and he just did that for fun. That was, so I remembered he was extremely talented, extremely nice, and also was a huge Nintendo fan. And so when we got the opportunity to do the Kickstarter for Swapfire 2, I immediately thought of him as the person who would be able to pull it off. And so he was on board to help us out a little bit then. And as things have progressed over time, he's become, I think, a little bit of a fan of the game. So I don't know if he's a big fan of it or not, but he got pretty excited recently with some of the things, and he's got also a lot of ideas on the gameplay side and all of that. So
I think a lot of people would look at Swapfire and see a lot of potential, because I know I do. I was wondering, real quick, Mr. Alessi. Christian?
Yes, sir.
Just checking on you. Mr.
Yep. Listening intently.
Yeah. That's good. Just let me know if you have any questions, though.
Oh, yeah, of course.
Anything you want to comment on real quick?
Not really. Though I would like to know how, like, you guys, how did you initially publicize your game? Like, I know you guys had PixelCon, but
yeah, with Pixel Fest was our first, I think, sort of dedicated effort. The truth is that the very first publicity that Swapfire had in terms of the Wii U version was when a small blog, I think, called 8 Worlds News, and I right now off the top of my head, I think the writer's name was Daniel Erickson, maybe. It's been a number of years now. It's been about close to 4 years, 3.5 years, but he did an interview, and this interview, I guess it was delivered in the summer of, hold on, let me think about this. No, it actually, I think it was actually January of 2016. And we had some screenshots that we posted, and with that interview, I'm trying to think how he saw the game. Oh, I remember now. We did one YouTube video of what was essentially 3 weeks worth of work. So 3 weeks into game development, we took a prototype to a local store called That Game Store in Virginia Beach, which was run by a guy named Ray, who also was a big help with Pixel Fest.
You remember a lot of people's names. I'm impressed.
I myself couldn't do that. So.
Yeah.
See, Ray had essentially one of these, I think there are a number of them now where you can go get used game consoles and things like that. He also sold, some new games, but like low inventory on that. So it wasn't like a GameStop or anything like that. It was a local store. But on Friday nights, he also had a Smash Brothers tournament that was hosted in his store. And so as we were preparing for Pixel Fest, we met Ray, and so then we went out to his store and we did a demo of Swapfire for the people who were there for the Smash Brothers tournament. And so when they weren't playing Smash Brothers, they came over and checked out Swapfire, and we got to do a little, chat about it. And he had a lot of people show up for these things. So I think it was a good, it was like 50 people or something that were packed into this really tiny store, maybe more than that. And we did a demo. It was 4-player split screen with the Wii remotes. It was drop zone, but we didn't have the characters or anything yet. So it was just a bunch of like capsules, like They looked like little pills running around shooting each other, but the gameplay was there, and so people were having fun. So we posted that video, and somehow or other, I think Daniel caught that video. I think is what happened, and so he did an interview, and then from that I think we included some screenshots in that interview, and that though somehow that got picked up, and Wired UK picked it up. I think Nintendo Everything, a bunch of the Nintendo sites picked it up in January of 2016, and that video that has been our most viewed video on the Swapfire channel of all the videos, and it's nothing crazy. It had like 7,500 views or something like that, but
Pretty good.
it's in this. I have to tell you, in this day and age, it's pretty good because a lot of the organic growth mechanics of like the social networks and things has really been locked down over the years. Back in like 10 years ago, 2008, 2009, you would get a lot more exposure for your stuff than you do now because these networks were basically they were trying to become kingmakers is what they were trying to do. And so they gave all the exposure away for free. And now it's incredibly difficult. And I also think there's a degree of like internet friction these days.
Well, I mean, the internet's so much bigger now than it was 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And even same goes for indie games. Like back when indie games were like something new and fresh for like Steam or even like the Xbox Live Arcade store, like Super Meat Boy, for example, or Fez, Shovel Knight, like all of that stuff was like new and fresh, and like it was like a reason to buy a good gaming PC or something, and like but now there's so many different indie games that blend together that it's hard to gain wide interest as much as like a game like Undertale or something does. It's just hard to prove your indie game to a massive amount of people.
It is. It's definitely more difficult today than it was 10. And I've been making indie games for a very long time. The first published title that I actually put out was in 2003. It was called Aerial Antics. It was a jetpack simulator, and Garage Games published it. And
Well, is that just on PC?
that was a PC game, yeah. And that back then, that was sort of before, I guess, indie games were popular. And in fact, to tell you the truth, when we delivered that, broadband penetration still wasn't very deep yet. And so I remember optimizing our demo for 56K modems because we knew that to download 5 megabits or 5 megabytes, it was 5 megabytes, but we knew that would take about 20 minutes to download, which was people's, that was people's threshold back then. And so that was sort of before the indie game boom. And then it was around 2008, but I would say between 2008 and 2012 was sort of the indie game boom. And we had 2 highly downloaded games on iOS that combined between just 2 of the games had around 5 million downloads. And
what game?
That was so they were Crash for Cash and a game called Airspin, and those games had a lot of downloads, and
Are they still on Android?
Maybe. I'm not sure. I keep the accounts open for Android and iOS, but I don't pay a whole lot of attention to them anymore. So they may still be out there.
I'll check on them.
I might go looking for that.
Crash for Cash was the first one, and then Airspin was in 2012, and it was at the very end of, I would consider, this sort of, and there's actually a term for it. People call it the indie-pocalypse inside the developer community.
Midnight status right here, 50K downloads.
Yeah, that's the Android version had much fewer than the iOS version. We delivered the iOS version and did the Android version a year or so later, but
it looks like Pilot Wings.
Yeah, well, so Pilot Wings is my favorite game.
Of all time?
The Super Nintendo Pilot Wings is like my favorite game of all time.
Wow.
And so Aerial Antics was definitely a love letter to Pilot Wings, and Airspin's definitely a love letter to Pilot Wings. And it's so it's Airspin's a faster, sort of a faster, snappier rendition of the flight mode that you would find in like Pilot Wings Resort. Mm-hmm. But it's its own thing at this point, and but it's certainly inspired by that. So I've been writing a lot of over my career, I've definitely written several love letters to, I think, Nintendo gameplay, and
Yeah.
if I could if I could have worked on a Pilot Wings game, it would have been great.
Oh, you should. Well, you gotta see. I don't know when the next time Nintendo's gonna work on one because I don't know. They don't make Pilot Wings games too often.
They do not. No, I think it's definitely a niche for Nintendo. It's
Yeah,
my favorite. Whenever they come out, I play the heck out of it.
the
I
3DS one's
still
a
play
lot of
the
fun.
original one on a regular basis.
Is the SNES one on the SNES Classic?
It is not, and it's a
Okay.
travesty. I think
Yeah.
about
That's a
the
damn
two
good
games
game.
that aren't on there that should have been on there, in my opinion, were Pilot Wings and also SimCity. I
Yeah.
imagine there might be some licensing issues or something with SimCity because I don't think they've had a version since the Wii Virtual Console, and I still have
Right.
that installed.
I know there's
Um,
references to SimCity and Smash. At least
yeah,
in Brawl, there's like an assist trophy of the
they
main.
have the mayor,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
maybe. So
Um,
I guess that was Miyamoto's and Nintendo's contribution to the game. There's a really great article that came out last month about the NES version of the game that was actually canceled.
I did not know
Um,
there was an NES SimCity. I would actually kind of want to see what that's like.
yeah, the
Kind of
guys.
want
It's I'm trying to think. Frank.
Yes,
I'm
Christian.
not going to be able to remember his last name. Let me look him up.
It's okay if Frank's fine.
Yeah,
to. Frank's fine. We'll
and
keep
I
him
don't know if
chill.
I'll be able to get his name right anyway, but um, I want to say Cifaldi.
Frank Cifaldi, that works.
Anyway, there was a great article on this, and it got me thinking about the SNES rendition again. I've actually gone back and been checking it out again. Yeah, so if you go to gamehistory.org, and it is Frank Cifaldi wrote this excellent article, um, and it covers basically Will Wright and his inspiration on that game, and it covers the collaboration of Will Wright and Shigeru Miyamoto working on the Nintendo renditions together, which are my favorite renditions of SimCity because it's like these two geniuses coming together, and it's a really unique blend.
That is really interesting because I always get an itch for a simulation game, and I never know how to scratch it. But you think SimCity on Super Nintendo is a one of the best simulation games?
It's one of my favorites because it's fun and it gives you like these Miyamoto style rewards while you're playing the game that make it interesting and gives you some feedback. Whereas when you play the PC games, they're a little bit more simmy and a little bit less gamey, well, especially the early versions. I think the later ones like SimCity 4, or was it SimCity 4? Is that the most recent? I'm trying to think. There was one in like 2013 that I played a
I'm
decent.
I'm unsure. I think the mobile one is the most recent one. I did play that for a few
Yeah.
days. It's really good.
So I'd say they've definitely gotten better at that. I think sort of back in the day though, the older SimCities were a little bit more simmy and a little bit gamey, and for some reason the Super Nintendo version, and maybe it's just me, maybe it was just Christmas morning 1991 nostalgia, but
Yeah,
it really it stuck with me.
that's interesting. I didn't know Miyamoto had a hand in making the SNES SimCity.
Yep.
Huh, that's pretty interesting.
And the NES version, I guess they had a ROM dump and backup of it recently for that's on. So you definitely check that article on GameHistory.org. It's super interesting.
Yeah, link me to it. I'll check it out when we're done recording. But do you consider yourself more of like a retro gamer? When it comes to playing games in like any spare time you get.
Yeah, at this point, I have the classics hooked up. I actually right now have a Wii hooked up. I do like to play Super Mario. My kids now are really enjoying that, and so I would say at this point, Mario Maker probably gets the most face time just because my kids are into it. And then after that, it's definitely any of the old SNES that are on the 3DS, or the classic systems. Actually, I'm really happy with Star Fox 2, which I have a
Sorry.
couple of renditions of that, but that on the SNES Classic. was one of my favorites.
Star Fox 2 is a technical marvel. That game is beautiful for what it is.
It really, really is. And there's
Yeah.
some people complained about it, and I was like, well, they don't know what they're talking about. This is
Well,
amazing.
like some
I
people
still think about it like Rose to 1995.
some people looked at it with like the standards of a game that came out today, and like
Yeah.
it's like you can't really judge it by that because it's like it's not technically a 2017 game. It's like a 1996 game. So I mean, it's like you got to judge it by that standards, I guess.
And I actually really enjoy the more sort of strategic slash tactical style of gameplay that it had. At first, I didn't get it, but after I played it a few times and I really got into it, it's become one of the more rewarding games for me to to try to become more efficient at and become better at. And yeah, and as far as the technical piece goes, it's just kind of mind blowing the level of
Yeah,
freedom
a
that
Super
they gave
Nintendo was
you.
supposed to run that.
Yeah, I mean, and fine, the frame rate is somewhere between 5 and 15 frames per second or something, but I mean, it doesn't matter because the game's still super playable in
Yeah,
my opinion. Anyway, it's like wow, it's
it
and
works
complex
great.
controls and things.
I think like that's the I've only played it a little bit, but Star Fox 2 is more like 360 degrees and not linear like the first one, right?
Yeah, they
Yeah.
did. They have the all range mode. They've got
Mhm.
the walker. So, as far as
It's
I can tell, there are well, let's think. There are several styles of gameplay. There are just space battles, which are 360 degrees also, and they're just sort of dogfights. There are some levels where you will enter into a ship, which are reminiscent of some of the scenes from the original Star Fox.
mhm.
But then once you get into sort of the belly of the ship, about this. There's sort of I think there's a walker,
Yeah, walking section.
and then you usually have to sort of blow up the core, and sort of ditto for the planets. But usually when you get to a planet, there's a surface mission that involves minor puzzle solving. On the harder difficulty levels, the puzzles become a little more intricate, and then once you solve the puzzles, it opens up the base, and you go underground into a base that's a little bit more like I think, kind of like the ship levels. And then there's also one of my favorite parts about it is you have this defense satellite,
Mhm.
and the defense satellite can be hijacked by the enemy, and then you have to go and free it. Um,
Oh, so it's like a rescue mission.
yeah, and it's
Okay.
sort of like your own thing, and I get a kick out of that satellite. I just get a kick out of Polygon as well. It's just that style to me, along with pixelated games, I think is pretty neat. Now we haven't seen a sort of kickback, a sort of retro kickback to early polygonal games, and I think most people agree that the 3D stuff right now people don't think it ages well.
Well, I don't know. I grew up with the PS1, so like I'm really glad that now we're trying to devs I'm pretty sure are working on more games that look reminiscent of like PS1 games.
hmm
I know on the early Switch days, one of the only survival horror games you could get was, I believe it was called Vaccine, and
Okay.
it was a survival game where like you just try to last as long as possible. I never played it, but it does try to replicate the look of the original Resident Evil.
Oh, that's kind of cool. Yeah,
Yeah,
definitely.
and I really appreciate that a lot, and I'm hoping more games go for that, like Silent Hill, Metal Gear Solid aesthetic, because that's how I remember games looking, and I hope that this pixel art stuff dies out and is replaced with like that low poly look, like with I know a Hat in Time, they spent months working on that filter for that game,
Right.
and
Okay. I mean, I will have to give that game a look. I do. I think somebody could do it justice, and I think, in particular, flat shaded polygons. That's something I think people could do a lot of justice at this point in time.
right,
Um, it's something like Star Fox. If it was remastered in HD and 60 frames per second, um, it that to me seems like there would be some appeal there, especially if they did it on the 3DS, sort of a la the Sega Classics, the arcade games in particular. I
yeah.
don't know if you've played this on the 3DS, but you've got
The Sega Classics. I know I've played the Genesis collection on Switch. I've been rocking Rystar recently. That's a great game.
Nice.
Yeah.
On 3DS, they have 3D renditions of Afterburner 2, Galaxy Force 2. They've got Outrun. They
Yeah,
have
I know what you're talking about. I think even Nintendo did that themselves with Kid Icarus, am I right?
Power Drift. Yeah, they did a couple of sort of like 2D, 3D versions.
Yeah.
Um, these Sega remakes, they're done by a studio in Japan, and they basically take the games that were the precursors to even things like Star Fox. And you can tell, like Galaxy Force 2, for example, is essentially what I think Star Fox had a couple of models. I think I've seen interviews with Dylan Cuthbert where he said that it was one of Namco's games, maybe Starblade,
Wasn't
that was a big influence.
the original Star Fox was made partly in hand with like a group of teenagers from Europe, am I wrong?
Yes, so Dylan Cuthbert was the programmer, and he was 17 when he developed it. The
Damn.
company was, hold on, Argonaut, which was run by Jez San, and I think Jez San was 22 or 23 years old, maybe, and then Dylan Cuthbert was 17, and Dylan had written a 3D engine for that worked on PCs, so they had a couple of 3D games, and then he created a 3D engine for the Game Boy.
Oh yeah.
So
A
That's
lot of
yeah,
awesome.
a lot of Game Boy Advance games have like a 3D engine to them. Like there's a lot of first-person shooters on the Game Boy Advance, and it's really interesting.
yeah, on the Advance for sure. This was on the very original Game Boy. So
You're
Dylan had,
kidding.
yeah, no, not kidding. He had figured out this guy. This guy is a genius. He had figured out how to render vector graphics. Um, and then for the Game Boy, though, the way that the display worked, I think it was, I'm going to get the resolution wrong, but essentially the display was broken up into boxes, and you had to draw, it was sort of like a tile map that you ultimately had to draw. And he had figured out a way to render and store the vector graphics in memory and then create tiles out of them and then reconstruct that visually, so he could create real time 3D on the original Game Boy,
That's
and so
crazy.
he was doing that as a teenager, and that's how he was doing that with Argonaut in the UK, and then Jez San approached. I believe the story goes that he approached Hiroshi Yamauchi. I believe that's what he did at maybe it was at CES, and he just went up to him and said, "We can make 3D games for the Super Nintendo." And Hiroshi Yamauchi apparently said, "Well, how much will it cost?" And Jez-san said he thought of the biggest number that he could think of, and just I think he said he threw out $2 million, $2 million to make this. And Yamauchi said yes, and so the deal was done that quick. And so Nintendo hired Argonaut to. I think he showed him maybe the Game Boy game. I think that's what it was. He had the Game Boy in hand, but
Imagine an alternate universe where
yeah.
Star Fox 1 came out on Game Boy. And
Oh, could you imagine? Yeah, they actually had a game in Japan that was. I'm gonna remember. I'm not gonna remember the name, but let's see if I can find it.
Kristen, what
Since
were you about to
since
say?
we're on our computers anyway, we can chat and search at the same time.
Yeah, that's what
Mhm.
I got my phone at my side for that. There was a Sega Genesis game with very similar technology to Star Fox, like the extra power had to be in the cartridge. Uh,
Virtua Racing.
Virtual Racing, yeah.
I got a couple of copies sitting right here. I paid $100 for that one.
When it first came out.
Yeah,
Wow, I know it's like $10 now,
yeah.
but I've been wanting to try it. Like I got to hook up my old Sega Genesis because my Sega Genesis, well, recently it's been a Switch cartridge, but before that I've been using one of those crappy At Games Genesis, and like they're no good. But I need to. I have an original one sitting in my basement. I need to dust off.
Here it is. It's called X.
Yeah.
X.
It's called X. So here, I'll
This
give you a
game for the
YouTube
Game
link
Boy.
for it. Whoops!
Whoa,
I don't
what
want
was
to have
that
that
noise?
sound. I don't want to have that sound in the video.
I'll edit
Good.
it out.
Yeah, so I'm going to send you a link to this. But yes, he created. There you go. He created a 3D
Wow.
vector graphics engine that worked on the Game Boy in real time.
Damn. The madman.
Yeah.
Wasn't there a first-person shooter on the Game Boy with like smiley faces and stuff?
Yeah, I remember that. Trying to remember the name of it though.
Yeah,
Yes, there was though.
I don't
A
remember the.
face. It was like Faceball or something.
Yeah,
I don't
yeah,
know.
yeah. Uh,
Um,
I do want to
it
watch.
was the first like four-player game I think on it too, right? The one where you could hook all the games
Oh
together.
God, a
And,
four-player Game Boy game.
yeah.
Fucking crazy.
Yeah, I remember just dealing with enough wires to hook up my Game Boy Advance to the GameCube and like transfer games from GameCube games onto the Game Boy Advance I could play until I turned it off. And even that was a nightmare. I can't even imagine having a four-player Game Boy game.
Yeah.
Lots and lots of wires. That's what I
Yeah.
imagine.
You need to like I said it's that reminds me of I never done it, but I know there was a time when you had to have just the right friends to play Four Swords on the GameCube. And you had to
Yes.
yeah.
We, my sister and I played that. That was a neat experience. I thought. I think at the time Nintendo was being heavily criticized for they wanted to connect all their devices together and sort of pull you into their ecosystem. And they were being criticized for this sort of intersystem connectivity instead of creating a real online ecosystem like PlayStation was doing at the time.
Like the Switch is like the perfect thing for it though. Like if you could have like a co-op Four Swords on the Switch or even like connecting 8 consoles locally, like it would just be brilliant for it.
Oh, that would be good. Heck
Yeah.
yeah, 8 swords.
8 swords.
I like it.
Heck, that's two Joy-Cons per Switch, 16 swords.
Yeah, there you go. 16 swords.
You know your
Four squared swords.
you know your stuff, man. I'm really impressed with you.
Well, I
Yeah, this is
appreciate that. You too. It's a
Yeah,
good conversation.
sure is. I've enjoyed listening to you.
man, I've learned a lot today.
Yeah,
Like holy shit.
I
yeah.
can't
Chris,
believe I gotta tell you, I just looked it up. It was Faceball. I can't believe I called that. Somehow
Facebook.
that stored in my memory
Well,
somewhere.
it's like what is the gameplay like? Isn't it like first person Pac-Man or something? Like
Yeah, I read about it and I never actually played it though. I
I don't.
read the reviews at the time. I looked at all the ads. I thought it was neat, but it just didn't seem like my cup of tea as a kid. I was mostly an action gamer, and
Yeah, me too.
it
Platformers here,
yeah,
I
Contra,
played a lot.
and I'm trying to think
I
if it
played a lot
veered
of
too far
Golden
outside of
Axe, yeah.
that, Mega Man,
man.
stuff like that, Mario, and
People
then
in the 80s and
maybe
90s had so much more patience than I did. Like if I played Contra as a kid, oh, that
yeah,
I
would
did
have
it like quick.
yeah. Like
Contra was tough for sure.
I barely have the patience for like Cuphead and Bloodstain now. I'm
Oh man,
trying to imagine as a kid.
Contra was the first game that I beat,
Damn.
Oh,
and
nice.
Did you use the code?
I definitely used the code.
Okay. That makes sense. I know like this one guy I watched on YouTube as a kid. It was called like AR Entertainment. This guy was really good. He was an upcoming entertainer, and then like he just stopped making content for his channel.
Oh gosh,
Yeah, this guy could have been huge today, but I think he stopped around 10,000 subscribers. But he he said and I don't know if I how much I believe this. This guy said he beat The Legend of Zelda on NES without the map as a 5-year-old.
wow.
Yeah, I'm not
Crazy.
I'm not buying it.
You're
I don't
like,
know.
dude,
I'm sure
I
stranger things have
love
happened.
some
So
movie here.
that if it's true, that's incredible. And
It's
I'm one of the I'm a sort of a believer that anything's possible. So
right. I
who
want to
knows?
believe it. I mean, I guess if you have enough time on your hands as a kid, there's tons of possibilities.
Sure.
But
Yeah, why not? Yeah, Contra without the 30 farthest I ever was able to make it was to the ice level, which was like I think the fifth map,
okay.
if I remember correctly. So yeah, I don't think I could ever get. I'd have to go back and give that another try. They don't have Contra, the original Contra on the NES Classic. They have Contra.
3?
They have Super C.
Oh yeah, that's the second one.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I have
Which is I had never actually played before. My buddy and I booted up the NES Classic recently, and that was actually my first time I think playing Super C, other than maybe for like 2 minutes, either at a friend's house or in a store once. And I might have only gotten to watch it, not actually play it. I
Yeah. Which
trying to
one?
remember the.
Which one's harder? You think? You think Super C's harder?
That is a tough call. I
You see, there's not much point of reference, so
I don't know. The original Contra to this day. So,
yeah. Well, I think if you don't mind, I don't know if we can all agree on this, but I think if I had to bid on the hardest Contra, it's the one on the SNES Classic, Contra 3.
Contra
that's
3. I might agree with you there.
That game is hard as hell. It's just
I have to go back.
That
I don't know. I don't know if I can agree. Was I able to beat Contra 3 on the trying to go back and think I was able to beat that game. I feel like I was able to beat that game without a 30-man code.
damn.
that's
Uh,
fucking insane.
yeah, all the classic games on the SNES Classic.
Mhm.
Super Castlevania 4. I love that game, but
It's a hard game.
it is hard. And
Oh
then
man.
none of I will beat Contra before I'll ever beat Super Ghosts and Goblins. What's it called?
Oh, that game was ridiculous. Yeah.
It's so
When
it's
I don't
insane.
think I ever beat Castlevania 4 without cheating to some degree. I think I used codes when I was a kid. You were able to get the codes out of like GamePro magazine and things, and then
Yeah.
recently I beat it again, but I did it using an emulator so that I would
Okay, yeah,
save my place a lot.
I don't know if I'm ever going to beat a old game honestly. Like I have two different versions of uh Castlevania 4, and one's on my 3DS and one's on my SNES Classic, and
Yep.
the only reason I think I'll ever only beat that version of the game and not the cartridge version is because I don't know if I could do it without the save states.
Yeah.
Like that
Yeah.
Gosh, I wish we had save states back in the day, though. Like on PC games, you had save states. If you were playing Doom or something like that, you
Oh
could save the
yeah.
game as much as you wanted to. So
Yeah, save states for emulators are a godsend.
they really are.
Yeah,
I
especially
love playing emulated games now for that reason.
oh yeah, especially for like young men like me. I don't have the time or patience to sit and uh beat like Super Metroid from save state to save state. I have to
Hmm.
I have to have the artificial ones provided by the console itself.
I was about to say, I can just picture it now, John, in between save states, sweating profusely, going, Jesus, I can't go through it
Well,
twice. I need it.
I'm imagining me playing Super Metroid and it's almost time to go to work and I'm like I'm almost at the second save stop.
You're like, I don't have time. I need to get there.
It's like, do I go to work on time or do I beat Super Metroid? Which
Yeah,
is
people used to do that. I mean, people would call in sick.
God.
Oh, man. That was a thing. My buddy, I swear he almost lost his job over Final Fantasy VII, which I think he could save that game anytime, but
Oh
he was
my
legitimately
God.
like, "Yeah, no, I called in again."
You're like, what?
But check it
Why
out, I
don't
got the
you go to
Hummet.
work in 4 days? So I can. This is what I would do. My boss, after a week of me not coming in, he'd be like, "So why haven't you been here for 4 days?" Sorry, boss. I was fighting mono, and in reality, I'm sitting at home, desperately trying to beat games that I never could.
You had to call off for the final boss of Cuphead.
Well, okay, honest to God, I've only ever done it once, and that's because I've called off once because of the game, and that's because I had on my just my Wii. There was a game that I hadn't beaten since owning it when I was like 8 years old,
What game?
and it was Scooby Doo Night of 100 Frames.
Awesome.
Hell yeah.
God, it was such a good game.
Is that the one with like the chibi art style? Like they had like big heads, smaller bodies.
No, it was
Oh, that's the
God.
GameCube game. You were playing the GameCube on the.
Yeah,
Yeah. Okay.
and it's the one where you have to, go through the different levels
That one's
to
like
beat the master.
like a Spyro type of deal, isn't it? Like.
A little bit, yeah. You could say it's a collectathon game where all you're doing is collecting Scooby snacks to unlock other areas. But thing is, I had it for the GameCube and I was playing it on my Wii, but I didn't have a save card. I didn't have a memory card, so I was like,
I
God,
have.
do I risk it turning off while I'm
It's like
at work and
Groundhog
having
Day.
to start the
Yeah.
whole game over?
Yeah, it depends on how much time you got, man, and
Yeah, I
patience.
was like 3/4 through the game, and I was like, you know what? I
Leave it
can miss a
running.
day of pay. That's fine.
Well, hey, you go back and play a game like, well, even the original Contra, or a lot of NES games are. You can beat them in like 20 minutes.
Oh yeah,
If you're good.
Yeah,
I just said,
if you're good, and some of them just weren't that hard in the first place. But when you compare that to games today, like growing up, games were sort of like a thing that you would do when you've been playing out. You would like come in and like play the game for a while.
Yeah.
And I feel like as I've watched the industry progress, it's almost like flipped around now, where people are playing games a lot, and they're like, "Well, I got to go outside for a little bit for a break." It's like the
Be like,
flippening.
I just need air. I've been in this room for 2.5 days. I need
Yeah,
a break.
Well, now if I ever have time to sit and play games for like the whole day, like it's a miracle because of how busy I am with life. But
Yeah,
there
with
was
like,
there was a time when like playing video games for the whole day was considered like sad. But now if you have like the time to do that while still having a life, it's like a little miracle, you
it
know.
is true. As an adult,
Yeah,
you cherish it if you get to actually sit down
yeah. If you
and play a
have
game and you're not worried about X, Y, or Z.
right, if you still have if
yeah.
you have a decent life and a job, you deserve to have like a couple days out of the year to play video games for a couple of hours. I mean, no one's going to
Yes,
yell at you for that.
Yeah.
yes.
Christian, I have a
God,
very similar relationship with a Scooby Doo video game on the PlayStation
uh,
1. I would play
it's-
through Scooby Doo and the Cyber Chase.
oh
And,
my God, I played that so much growing up, and
well,
it's such a good game.
it's like Crash Bandicoot, but with Scooby Doo. And,
Exactly.
Huh.
and, it's the goofiest game ever. Like, it's very, like, if you enjoy, like, Scooby Doo memes, I guess you'd say, it's very, you'll get a kick out of it, because, like, the sense of humor in the game is pretty good.
I'm
Uh,
Oh
checking
yeah.
it out. Yeah.
Yeah, I have a lot of nostalgia towards it, but it's not an objectively good game by any means. But
No, I just enjoyed it because that was the game I grew up
right,
playing, and
yeah, I love it out of nostalgia and nothing else. But
exactly.
when I got towards the end of the game as a kid, I could probably beat the game in like a day now because I realize how easy it is. You just have to have patience.
Oh,
Um,
nice. Yeah, you're totally Crash Bandicoot with Scooby characters.
yeah,
That's sweet.
yeah. Uh, go check your local game store, man. I'm sure it's sitting there for
Yeah.
like $10 at most.
Oh yeah,
I'm
bro.
gonna hit up eBay.
I'm glad I could inspire your taste of games. Uh, but when I got towards the end of the game, I would leave my PlayStation 1. We didn't have cards, same way you did, Christian. We didn't have save cards as a kid. Because,
For PS1, yes, you did. Don't lie.
no, for PS1, they're super expensive. Like, at the time.
They are stupidly expensive.
Even to this day, like, the PS Vita shitty card you need to get to download any games on it. It's like $80 for like a 32 gigabyte card. It's dumb. But the point I'm getting at here is I'm amazed my PS1 still works to this day because I would leave that thing running for like days on end just to
Yeah.
keep my level in Scooby Doo and the Cyber Chase.
Okay, straight up, I would like the game I would play on a PlayStation 1 was Spyro 2 Ripto's Rage. And
That's the best one.
it is the best one. And I will fight anybody who argues. But so and I've recently beat it on the Reignited trilogy, which I think it lost some of its some of
Charm.
its charm.
Absolutely.
But,
I noticed I haven't played the Reignited trilogy too, and I love it. But if I love it as a new game, I will say with like Crash Bandicoot, it always had the detailed environments, but with Spyro, it was always like less detail in exchange for a more open world.
yeah.
And that way, but they take that open world that was at one point less detailed and give it this insane level of detail to the point where you can't really recognize the game.
Yeah, and then it just gets like, oh, well, this isn't as fun as it used to be. But I mean,
It's not as nostalgic. Like even with like the Insane trilogy, it still resembles the old Crash games in terms of the art direction. But with like the new
yeah,
Spyro games, like I can see why they're not as nostalgic.
mhm. They're just. I mean, I guess they're kind of reintroducing Spyro to a younger fan base.
Yeah, and if we get like remakes of like not even remakes, if we just got like a Spyro 4, it's well worth it.
Oh yeah, straight up.
Especially now I'm looking so much forward to that Crash Team Racing remake.
Yeah,
So that's
Or
interesting. It's a little bit of a. You're saying that they've maintained the art style of the original PlayStation games.
well,
I mean, obviously, probably made everything run quicker and smoother and whatnot, but it
absolutely.
actually gives you the nostalgia factor when you're playing these the reboot.
No, with
yeah.
Crash it does, but with Spyro, like they've added so much detail that it no longer looks the same.
Right,
Not to
right. But
mention the
Crash did it
voices is
successfully. Yeah.
definite.
Yeah, Crash did it very well, and everybody who I knew grew up playing that game. Like when you're a kid and you see those old polygonal graphics on your CRT television, your mind fills in the gaps and imagines this like 4K experience.
Yep. Yes.
And and like whenever I hand the Insane trilogy over to my cousin or brother, they're like, it's welcome home, you know?
You go back and play the original. Like, wait a minute, that's not.
Yeah, well, I'm like, I wish on the Insane trilogy you could turn on the old graphics because especially for Crash 3, I miss those old graphics so much.
Right.
But it's still the same game. But I understand where Christian's coming from. Where with Spyro, it's lucky that it's a good game in its own right. But they don't capture that old feeling. And
Oh,
it's not just because of the visuals. It's because they make like different sound effects and stuff. It's weird.
right.
Yeah, well,
Yeah,
not
there's
to
actually
mention
some
the
comparison
voices are
shots online, which is interesting.
Yeah, like the graphics comparisons, which like no,
Mhm.
like of course the new game looks quote unquote better, but I mean like you can tell the little things that they changed with like down to like the grass and the walls and the lighting, how like I can see where it would bother someone.
Right. I
Oh yeah.
think Twisted Metal 2 might have been my favorite PlayStation 1 game.
There's no bad choice when it comes to Twisted Metal, man. They're all awesome.
Yeah.
Oh hell yeah.
I don't know. Favorite PS1 game is hand down Crash 3, but I could man, if I would not be the man I am today if not for Pro Skater.
Oh,
Oh
yes.
my.
Oh my gosh. That was an excellent game.
Oh yeah.
Actually, it is tough to call the best original PlayStation game. That's a tough call.
It's
You know, for
different for
me,
everybody.
Twisted Metal 2 it holds a really special place because it's what made me realize that I wanted to be a game developer.
Is that the one with Rob Zombie?
I don't believe so,
I
but
think it's Twisted Metal 4.
it might be. That might be. But Twisted Metal 2, there was a demo on the very first PlayStation Underground disc. And along with that demo,
Demo
there
disc.
was a developer interview with David Jaffe, who was the original designer of Twisted Metal and also the designer of God of War. And he said something in this interview like, you know, you don't need a Silicon graphics machine to make a great game. You could have a paperclip and like a pencil and a coconut, and you should be able to make a great game with that. And
Is
it
that
was
why
just
the
like super practical advice, actually.
is that why the
Like
back
you're
of
just
the
trying to make
swap
something fun, you know?
is that why the back of the Swap Fire shirts on Kickstarter are coconuts?
You know, that's interesting. It is not, but I should actually find a way to tie that into the narrative.
That would be cool.
Did you find the secret area in Swapfire, or
No,
did you find the coconut?
I hate to admit it, but I haven't played the game fully because at first I made the mistake of skipping the cutscenes and I couldn't figure out what to do, but I was still
Ah,
fascinated by the game. Uh, and I will go back and unlock all the modes now because now that I understand how to play it, I'm more intrigued by it. But
so I don't want to give you too many spoilers, but
right.
I don't this one this is I think this one's okay because it's not too big of a spoiler. But
Mm-hmm.
if you get to the very end of the third training,
Mm-hmm.
Did you notice that there's a wormhole like out in space when you get there?
No, I'm afraid not. I think I took a break after that part where there's nine swap buddies and you had to pick the right
Ah,
one.
yes, yes.
After that, I just decided to take a break because that part is like trial and error for me personally, at least. But
Definitely. I've only seen one person who looked at that,
like, did it their
uh,
first try.
and they could figure it out just by looking. And you can deduce, but it's very difficult.
Yeah, yeah, you gotta take your time with it. But I was trying to do that earlier with the sideways remote controls, so I was just more testing that out than trying to progress in the story. But that does bring me to one last question, and then we're gonna try to have some more casual conversation before we wrap up. But one last interview
Sure.
question I would like to ask is with Swapfire season two, or not even season two, could be season three, four, any future title for the series, would you consider like a bigger single player experience?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, the single player in the first game was built to just train you to prepare you for the multiplayer.
Absolutely.
Um, and
Like you can.
there was a story that we're trying to tell, and a bigger story that we're trying to tell with it. But the first game, I mean, it really just sort of like leans the surface of that, and it's there's a little bit there to sort of get you thinking of what might be possible if there were a larger single player campaign. And
Mm-hmm.
to tell you the truth, it really depends. With the second game, I want to put something bigger together than what we had in the first game, but I don't. It's difficult to say whether we'll have the resources to do it full justice at that level. It might have to wait till the third game. It's difficult to say how comprehensive the single player will be in the second game because our goals with the second definitely the art style and really bringing nice graphics to the game now that we feel very confident with the core mechanic, bringing it
Absolutely.
online, uh, certainly continuing the story and expand. Whether or not we'll actually reach the point where you would consider it a full campaign or something. I'm not sure how far we'll get into that, but
Even if it's a
certainly more than the first game. It may still come to the point where it's not. It couldn't be considered a full campaign, but that's very tough for me
right.
to gauge right now whether it's that point or not with the second game.
There is a lot of single player potential with the mechanics of Swapfire. I would like to see, even if it's like a short 3 hour campaign, the I would like to see what that'd be like. But I know it might not.
Me too.
It might not.
Me too.
Yeah, it might not happen quite right now, but in the future of Swapfire, I think a lot of people would be wanting to see that.
I just keep thinking of all the things you could do with mechanic. There's so many things you
Right.
can do with it.
I mean,
It's so prone to emergence that
have you
yeah,
played
there's just it would be a good time. It would be a good time.
one game that I can compare Swapfire to in terms of mechanics is, have you played this indie game called The Swapper?
I saw the Swapper.
Uh huh.
I'm trying to think if I played it because the game was released. I think the year after I did the Game Jam game for Swapfire,
Okay.
and I was at the point that I had made the Game Jam game. I was hypersensitive to anything with the word swap in it. And so I saw the Swapper and I thought, what's this game? Is it going to use the same mechanic? Because when you're a game developer and you come up with a new mechanic like that,
It
um,
almost does, but if you're getting to the same place I'm getting at, it's a game where you like project clones of yourself through gaps or across the room, and then you
okay.
project your consciousness of the character that you're playing as into the clone, so that way if the original you dies, it's okay, and
Ah,
and but your clones always mirror your movements, and you might have to like run one against a wall or use one to push something or sacrifice one. It's a very interesting puzzle game.
that's interesting. It sounds like there's a little four swords mechanics in there.
Kind of, but it's all single player, and
Right.
yeah, there. I guess you could say it is kind of four swords, but I think like in terms of mechanics, that's the only thing I know how to compare Swapfire to. Of course, the when it comes to comparing Swapfire to obvious games, the obvious thing comes to GoldenEye. So
Yeah, that's well, I'm glad that you use GoldenEye as the
I know
that's
you love that one quote that you keep advertising your game with. I know what I don't remember word
Kevin
for word.
Austin of Play Some Video Games. They've got a podcast and they had a blog at the time doing games reviews, but he wrote a nice article, just sort of a summation of the game and the story and background and everything, and then described the multiplayer fun that he had. And he said, I'm not going to get the exact quote right. He said he called it a combination of GoldenEye and Smash Brothers and Portal, and so he sort of summed that up and said it was what it was. As if GoldenEye married Portal and had a little baby with some Smash Brothers like unpredictability. I think that was the quote.
Yeah, what a
But
beautiful family.
man, so happy when he wrote that and I read it and I was like, wow, this guy got our intent, which was just really going back and GoldenEye was one of the primary Nintendo 64 games, but it was
Right.
if you looked at it's sort of our experiences when we were younger were GoldenEye, Smash Brothers, Mario Kart, and there's some other influences in there, but sort of mixing the
Well,
Portal influence is mostly after I decided I didn't want to do a dark theme.
yeah, I do
And
respect
so
that Swapfire is a very family friendly shooter game, which there's not a lot of. You got Splatoon and maybe the Gunslinger, but like that's about it in terms of family friendly uh, shooters. So I
it's it's tough to make a non-violent shooter, especially one that feels
absolutely
competitive.
right.
Um, Super proud of that. The I think some people thought we were really gunning for Portal like right from the get go, and I think that's mostly in the approach of the single player
The
that we
single player, I
did.
can see the resemblance because it's a computer talking to you through
Yeah.
a lab.
So people pulled that and said, "Oh, they're trying to." It was more like we had this concept for this risk reward mechanic, and it was super dark and depressing. And we lightened it up and we created the game show. And then when we did the single player, we were doing some prototyping and we approached it from that direction, and certainly used that as an influence. That when I don't know if it was a mistake or not. I like what we did with Dr. Rosen, and I like some of the puzzles and things that we did. In sort of subsequent discussions afterwards, we thought, well, we probably could have designed a series of almost like Olympic-looking field, sets with puzzles on them as well, and done something similar. I'm not sure if it would have played the same or come out the same.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something that we thought about and may use in the future instead of a corridor based shooter. And of course, if you do unlock all the content in the first game, of course there'll be a couple of surprises. And they will open us up to do, I think, more in the future. But with the single player, I think the core style and just having somebody narrate, because we needed obviously a way to express the mechanics to you. And even looking at something like Swacker, where we've got a stadium and such, I'm not sure, sort of on the flip side is with the limited resources that we had, would we have been able to pull off, a sort of Olympic style stadium? Some of the stuff that you see in like the comic illustrations could we have pulled that off and done it justice? And so, I think all things considered, is probably the right direction. It's difficult to maintain the narrative of where the mechanics came from and things like that. If people are thinking, oh, this game is just coming directly for Portal's mechanics, when that's not where it started in any way, shape, or form. It really just started with that risk reward mechanic that I described in the beginning. But
Absolutely.
certainly, we took a cue from Portal on format of the training. So, and
Yeah.
that's okay because Portal's a great game, and
Yeah, it's a good.
first articles that I wrote was about Portal, and I loved Portal. So if there's any game that's worthy of a little bit of a love letter, then certainly Portal's one of them.
Absolutely, and I think Portal's always been cooperative and never competitive. So to see like a competitive Portal style game is definitely pretty interesting.
It
Awesome,
is.
awesome.
Yeah. Um, I appreciate all your insight on that, man. It was really good listening to you.
Well, thank you. It's
Hmm.
been great chatting with you.
Yeah, yeah. No, you've been a
Yes, thank
wonderful
you so much
guest.
for the presentation. Good.
Yeah, and it's been you've made for a good guest. One of our best episodes in a while. I'm just gonna go ahead and transition, segue into some more light conversation here. Well, I do want to mention one thing that I don't want to I don't want to leave this out. I did notice one of the most intriguing things on your Kickstarter page was that there are comic books for Swapfire. Are those have those been published, or is that just like a future thing?
No, no, they're not published yet. We so Vince White is the artist who did the illustrations, and he did the cutscene characters.
Mm-hmm.
So in the beginning, when there's that, we've worked with Vince 5 or 6 years now, and he produces comic books all the time. So he's got a very popular series called Will,
I'm
and he
sorry, it's
does
called
the
what?
physical books, and he also does the Powerverse
Mm-hmm.
and
What
a
was
number
his
of other
What was his
comic book
first?
series.
What were the names of
Oh,
his shows? His
Will,
comics you cut out.
Will Power. There you go.
Willpower.
Sent it to you. Yep.
Okay.
And I think you can go. Let me see. Can you go to willpower.com? I think willpowercomic.com, and then you can see all the comic books that that Vince produced.
Okay.
And so we've been talking to him. So one of the things that we've got going on right now is we're working with a writer named Casey Ward, and she is helping to craft the story and the narrative along with me. So we took what I created for the first game, and we spent a lot of time really trying to do the world building now, because
I love me
almost
some world
everything that
building.
I did. What was that?
I just said I love good world building. I'm a sucker for anything with good world building.
Yeah, so Casey is very much into that, and Vince is very much into, and it's something that I'm into. I'm a generalist. I touch all parts of what we're building, but they're into it deeper. And I think Casey in particular is extremely good at world building,
Oh yeah.
and trying to fit all. And she challenged me so much
Hmm.
on my assumptions, what I was creating, the decisions that I was making, and I hope that that is going to give us the groundwork to create an actual, a very nice comic book, as well as the narrative that will be in the single player, and also even the cutscenes and any of the action or references that happen in the multi. There's a couple of things in the first game where I'm trying to make hints to the narrative, even in the multiplayer, even during the gameplay. For example, if you're in any of the levels that have water, you'll notice that the Einros cannon's beam will disrupt the wall. It cuts cactuses, and so there's this reference to the fact that the beam, although Jeeves says it's completely safe and reliable, it's not completely safe and reliable. Like, you're wearing a suit for a reason, and you can slice open the coconut and things like that. So there are these references to, especially with water, that there's a sort of disruption that goes on there, and there are things like that. There are myriad of other clues that have been dropped to shape the narrative, but to really work those out and make sure that they all tie together well is quite a challenge. And the discussions and the documentation and all that and it has to go so deep if it's going to be a platform to be able to do real world building and real storytelling on top of. And if there was any sort of meta reason for telling a story like that with Swapfire, it's probably to talk a little bit about how we use technology and like like where's it really going? Like, um, what happens when you extrapolate out on a sort of technological precipice and you go too far? I think those are sort of the questions. And so that's with Swapfire, and there was another game that I'd worked on a while back. The very first Kickstarter that I'd ever run was for a game called Hail. The Kickstarter was not successful on that, and that's a game that I still got in my back pocket. But in both of these stories, there's a sort of, well, we're using this technology. We want to be powerful, and we want to have convenience and whatnot. But is there a point at which the technology becomes dangerous, and you sort of have a flippening where you go from at one point in time it's not enough, it's not serving people well enough, and then all of a sudden it flips over and it's actually misserving people at a certain point, right?
Yeah, people always want more.
Yeah,
that's true.
And more is not always better. It's like there's like a center of gravity or center of balance for any given direction vector. It seems like there are two ends of the spectrum, and there's a sort of middle ground where everything's working rather well, and you feel a sense of balance. And so with technology, have we passed that already? Are we going to pass it? I think it's an interesting.
I don't think we've passed it, but I think we're approaching it.
Right?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, I think
especially with like Tesla and things that Elon Musk and them are doing with AI. It's just a very scary time to be alive.
So like, I'm all down for like anything to do with like projectors and screens and cars and stuff like that. But can we stop with the AI?
Yes, please.
Yeah.
I don't want to be. I don't want my toaster to be my master. I think I'd
Have you guys heard that like the transcript of the AIs that Facebook made that they had to shut down because they made their own language, and they like if you listen to that, it's so creepy. It's
super creepy. Yeah.
That's some creepy shit.
I can't even think about it, but
it's the interesting thing, and I teach. I also do a little teaching at a local private school here, and in addition to some of the Education Pixel Fest. But one of the things I try to get my students to understand is when they're writing code, that code is there to capture your intent, and that your intent should be to scale the intention of whatever your users are. And I think that generally speaking, technology is a decent thing when it's scaling the intention of an individual. Where it seems to go awry is when all of it flips back and it starts suppressing the individuals that are using. And we're seeing, we've seen some of that here and there. We're seeing some of it even with, just basic users of social media and social. And so I think it's important to remember that, individuals have free will and they can choose their own direction, and they should be free to explore a new direction and then communicate that with their peers. And if their peers with them as a flock, that's okay, as long as nobody's thrown a bunch of chains around the necks of the birds in the flock in order to control the direction that the flock goes. And so as long as technology enables an individual to have that idea, go off, do something different, other people see it, they like, where that's going, and they can go along as well if they so choose. Great. That's, if technology is being used for that, fantastic. But it's true. As somebody starts using that to suppress and or to curb the direction of individuals, and we start seeing problems. And I would say 10 years ago, it seemed to me that there was a lot of scalar for people's individual free will. And, that's how we got, I think that's why YouTube and Facebook and Twitter and other social started to blow up, was because individuals all of a sudden had a huge platform to get their new ideas and find audiences, people that agree. And now over these last couple of years, we've started to see, some suppression, and we've started to see some, and it's been at all levels, sort of a little bit of the hammer coming down and hitting the nails. And so all of a sudden we're seeing this technology turn back on the user base and such. And it's like, is that, it's questionable. I've seen a couple of times where it's questionable as to whether or not people are using that appropriately. Yeah, I'd like to see. Yeah,
There was the whole case with like Mark Zuckerberg, like is he invading our privacy and stuff like that with Facebook? But I think social media is relatively harmless on at face value. But I don't know. People do get a little bit wary when it comes to your privacy on the internet. Like, how easy is it for someone to see your whole family or your credit card or
well,
whatever?
the scarier things that have happened, how the news feeds have been manipulated. So there was an experiment that Facebook did a number of years ago to see if they could, force people into a state of depression, or at least a more depressed or more happy state than whatever their baseline was,
Really? Is
and
that
cause
legal?
that reaction online. And so depending on what news they injected into the news feed, or they could actually change the mood of the individual who's reading the news feed. And
That's insane.
yeah, so with the power, the real power, and the real dangerous power of the social media that we see is that the feeds are subjective. And so everybody's seeing something different, and they're seeing something different depending on their personality and their socioeconomic class, and all of that. And so,
It's all catered to
uh,
personal interest.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's sort of the, I don't want to say it's the cover story, but yeah, that's sort of the excuse. Like, oh well, it's catering to what you're interested in, right?
Right.
But then the strange thing is, if you take that out, and I don't want to get too hyperbolic, talking about it, but at that point, it can be, there's a sort of picking and choosing that goes on as to what you see in your news feed, and then depending on who you are, what your socioeconomic class is, uh, other things, information can be injected into the news feed to get you, thinking, well, I need to do this or I need to do that, and so there's a degree of top down control that can be had through the news feed, right? If people aren't really the way they think about that. So the experiment where they decided to affect people's moods, and they released the research on that, but that's scary. That's because
Why
people
would the media need us to be more depressed, though?
more depressed, more, well, that
Or
that's the real
happier?
question.
If they're
Why
going to
would
use that emotional manipulation for their social media platforms, I would like to think that they do it as much as they can to make people happier.
right? That's so, and that's the I guess that's the question, right? And once you go down that rabbit hole and you start getting into that stuff, it goes all it breaks apart a little bit, right? Because you enter the conspiracy theory and such. But um, it's it's clearly been used to do these sorts of things. It clearly can be used for those purposes. And our question now is, well, should it? And what can we do to avoid allowing individuals to be manipulated by the system? It's like individuals should be able to manipulate the system, and they should be able to see what's objective and what's true, and they should not be fed disinformation, especially to have them making certain decisions. There was an article that I read recently that said something to the effect of, disinformation spreads quicker on social media simply for the fact that it's more clickable. So there's people are making more money
Absolutely.
through the disinformation, and so that's a problem, in
It's
and of
like
itself, and that's one
pe-
layer of problem.
yeah, people making like false accusations to like for example, like people calling PewDiePie a far right or a Nazi. It's like I know it's a weird example, but still, it's like people just slander someone's name for the sake of a click. It's
Yes.
crazy.
No, yeah, the character assassination is sort of getting out of control, and it's so the internet is so powerful, I guess, though, that
It's got influence on everything.
yeah, yeah. So I don't know. I guess one of the questions that should be asked, and a good place to ask the question is, I think, is definitely in creative media, whether it's a game or a movie or a comic. These are good places to ask these questions, and I think pose.
So you're talking about putting like political commentary in your comics or your games.
Yeah, I think to a degree. I think it's a good place. I've
Uh,
been looking at the landscape.
I like it when political commentary is there, but it's not the main focus. You know what I'm talking
No,
about?
definitely don't ever want to make it the main focus.
Right.
Just sort of like, hey, this is where I'm at. This is sort of the state of the creating this piece of media, mostly for entertainment. But, if it gets you thinking about something, that's not terrible. I think some of the media that I consumed when I was younger, whether it was GI Joe, like I feel like GI Joe when I was a kid, I watched the GI Joe comic, and that might have been, I'm sorry, not the comic, the cartoon.
Right.
And I think that might have been the first cartoon that I watched that actually got me thinking about this sort of organic, natural existence versus the sort of man-made machine existence. There was like a GI Joe movie.
Absolutely.
I don't know if did you guys ever watch that?
The
The G.I. Joe movie?
the Dwayne
GI
Rock
Joe the movie
the
was like Don
Dwayne
Johnson was the voice of
Dwayne
Falcon.
Johnson. I've seen the live action
Uh,
ones. I've not known the
Oh,
animated one.
those are yeah. So those are much newer. You go back to for me, and that was cool too. But in like I think it was like 1987, there was a cartoon GI Joe movie, and Don Johnson. I don't know if you know Don Johnson is. He's definitely older. He was the voice of one of the characters. So do you remember? Have you heard of Miami Vice?
That's a TV show, is it not?
Yeah, it was a TV show in the 80s, and then there was a and Colin. I want to. It's not Firth.
Isn't that like
The other.
like the bridged sunglasses and the mustaches? Isn't it one of those type of
Yeah,
like
they.
aesthetic shows?
Yes, no. I don't think any mustaches, but anyway, it's a falcon in this movie. But like as a kid, I'm watching this cartoon, and it's getting me to contact, the sort of, where are we going with our technology, and that was way back. And I think that the question of where we're going with it is still sort of an ongoing thing, and we have to constantly evaluate. Well, how is it going to affect people? And at the end of the day, it seems to me that it's sort of all about serving people, and hey, here we are, different people have they have different desires, and it's sort of you have to find the person that can help you, find the people that you can help, and so on and so forth. So if technology can help you serve each other better, then but if all of a sudden technology it becomes like I said, if it reverses and it's no longer a scale on individual intent, and it becomes a control mechanism for individuals, that's where I look. I don't think that that's right anymore. So what can we do to change that, and kind of where does that happen? Where does it become a control mechanism versus a scalar for individual free will? And so if I think if there's a little bit of on that, that's light, then it's okay. I also don't like it when I can where there's a sort of political message that's super overt.
Right.
Because then all of a sudden I feel like, oh, I'm just an advertisement or something for this this political thing, and it's like, well, that's no good either. So it's got to be I think Stan with Marvel, he probably did it pretty well. I feel like growing up watching something which I as an adult maybe I only realized that there were a couple of messages and points in there and things like that. But certainly I've consumed some media. Oh my God, they're trying to tell me this, and they're trying to make me think this way, and all of a sudden it's all false. It can be done. There's I don't know. I think as long as you're just getting people telling them what to think, that's kind of where you draw the line. It's like, hey,
Right.
it's thought provoking, so you're going to think about it, and then you're going to use your own free will to evaluate, what you're going to do about it. But whenever somebody makes you think something new, that's kind of cool. You're like, all right, I ain't afraid.
Yeah, you gotta look at things with new perspectives every now and again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
Well,
yes, Christian.
gentlemen, I was gonna say, I do have to get going pretty soon. I have a paper due that I was supposed to be doing. It's doing an hour.
Oh,
It's applied science, so I'm not too worried about it.
my mistake, Christian. I know. I didn't mean to hold you up from your college work.
No. It's fine. It's applied. Like I said, it's applied sciences, and
And I know
well, when am I ever going to use Einstein's theory of relativity?
you can well, you never know. I know you write papers pretty quick, so you should be good.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
that to say. Oh,
Sounds like
did I?
sounds like a fun time talking about.
God, I
Theory of
don't.
relativity, yeah.
Are
Yeah,
you this discussion I've seen mirrored a couple of times about Interstellar,
The movie?
the scene
the movie.
on the planet where they're orbiting a black hole. Have you seen?
I have seen parts of that movie. I've never seen the full movie.
No, I haven't gotten
Oh,
to
you gotta check that
Interstellar,
one out.
unfortunately.
Gotta check it out.
I would love to
Um,
talk about space, but I do think it is getting time to wrap it up. Although, Jeremy, I do appreciate all of your insight on the technology. But we're just going to calm down here for a second, talk about something a little bit more light, and then say our goodbyes, and that'll be the episode. One thing I've just wanted to discuss is any upcoming games, movies, TV shows that's not out yet. You guys are excited for?
The Grammys, for the first time in like 6 years.
The Grammys.
Because
They still do the Grammys. I know. Why are there so many reward shows? There's the Oscars, the Golden Globes, the Grammys.
it's all different
well,
sort of the stages of the entertainment
Right.
complex, right? It's like you have for movies, for TV shows, for
Absolutely.
have you guys ever heard of a band called Ghost?
I have not.
I'm afraid not, man. It's kind of a vague name. I feel like there could be a few bands named Ghost, but what do I know?
Give me one quick sec. Let me send you a picture of their lead singer.
Kristen, do you
it's
still listen to like emo bands from like high school and stuff?
no. This one is like a full-on metal band, but they're 80s esque.
Okay, that's cool. It's like Iron Maiden
Yeah.
or
Awesome.
Heck
Yes,
yeah.
but more satanic.
Okay. So I'm trying to
Like,
think.
let's see,
Black Sabbath.
Cardinalopia. Do what? Black Sabbath. A little bit, yeah, actually.
I don't know. They're kind of like the only satanic band I could think of, at least from that
We
time
get-
period.
Well, see, they're not satanic in like we worship the devil. They're more so satanic in we make fun of people who worship the devil.
Okay, that's really funny.
Yeah.
I like satire metal bands. Like I think there's a band called Oakley Dokley, and they're all dressed as Ned Flanders.
That's amazing.
And they're a genuinely good metal band.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
I need to find this.
I know in terms of my upcoming stuff, in terms of music, I already mentioned the game I'm looking forward to, and that's going to be aside from all the like Luigi's Mansion 3 and Metroid Prime 4 and the obvious stuff like that, I am looking forward towards the Crash Team Racing remake. But in terms of music, I'm looking forward to Curly. She has a new album coming out called Shadow Works, and I always loved her music, so that's probably going to be like the only album I buy this year.
Mm.
I'm not much of an album guy anymore. Jeremy, how
Yeah.
about you?
On the games front, I keep checking the Switch eShop for Virtua Racing. So Sega's flat shaded polygonal racer in the arcades that my friends and I used to play like crazy on like Friday nights when we were freshmen in high school. We'd go to our local mall and we'd get gyros, and then we would go and just play the heck out of 4-player Virtua Racing. And so that's coming to the Switch, and I think it's going to be the first like arcade perfect home port of the game.
Oh,
And I'm hoping that they make it just like the arcade game.
it is going to be on the Switch?
Yeah, this came out a couple months ago. I'm super excited about that. So I just keep checking. I'm like, when is it going to be out?
I do want to
Going
say
crazy.
your adventure of going to the mall, getting churros, and playing Virtua Racing. Sign me up. That sounds
Yeah.
like
Oh my gosh, it was so much fun. It was gyros. I said gyros. I was trying to do the Greek accent.
Oh, okay, heroes. I was thinking, I thought you said churros.
Hey, churros are good too, but I didn't
Yeah.
discover those until later.
Yeah, I need to go back.
But yeah,
when,
gyros, man, the good old Greek, classic.
Yeah, I don't know.
And
man.
then, I'm trying to think. Like, I like movies a lot as well. I feel like music, I've almost like fallen off. Like you're talking about upcoming music, and I'm like, huh. I
I
don't look forward to.
me
I don't actually follow like music that I'm looking
Mhm.
forward to. So
me
I
too, man. I don't follow
yeah, so
music anymore.
that's cool though. I feel like I need to check out more music,
Yeah, I don't.
more upcoming music.
I just don't listen to music as much as I used to. I just got like the same 20 songs on YouTube, and that's it.
Yeah, but movies. I actually got to go with a friend and watch Glass last night.
I hear that
Um,
No,
sucks.
no, 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 no. I'm taking my girlfriend to go see it on Friday.
don't I can't
Don't.
give any spoilers or anything like that. So yeah, it did not get good reviews, but like I don't care. I
Well,
loved Unbreakable. I loved Split, and I love this movie also. It
good for
for
you. Uh,
Mhm.
whatever. So I had a good time, and
I I
I'm still sort of digesting it.
I have been
Yeah.
making the joke Glass more like I'll pass, um but that's just
No.
because I haven't seen the prior movies. That's all my fault. But
Oh man,
uh
so
yeah,
I think Split is the best of them.
that's what I've heard.
Uh,
Mhm.
and it's probably Split, then Unbreakable, then Glass. But I mean, I can't say that I didn't enjoy Glass because I liked Unbreakable when I saw it, almost 20 years ago or whatever. But
And
I
this is
liked Unbreakable. I really liked Split, and you know what? I was along for the ride with Glass as well.
and this is part
And
of a trilogy.
yeah, it's like it's an interesting setup too because it's almost like a Y-shaped trilogy, right? It's like you have the story of Bruce Willis and Unbreakable
Right.
Mhm.
merging with the story of James McAvoy's character in Split, and this movie is named if you don't know, I don't want to give anything away, so
Isn't
you're
it
gonna have to
Morgan
find out. But
Freeman's
basically,
character?
it's these two worlds sort of coming together, and you're realizing it's part of a bigger a bigger thing, and yeah,
I've
it was cool.
I've heard it
It
described
was
as
different.
like it's like a more like dramatic uh superhero universe uh in a way. Like it's like a not like Marvel's or DC's universe, but it's kind of like its own connected series.
Yeah, no, that
Mhm.
yeah, definitely. But I think the key about it is that it's well, it might be more dramatic if you're talking about like the performances of the actors and such, but
Right.
it's actually like superhero movies have a tendency to go way over the top. So
Right.
the plot is
Trust me,
actually
I
a more
saw.
it's actually a more subtle version of the big superhero stories that we see.
Trust me,
Um,
I saw Aquaman. I know over the top.
yeah, well, DC is the worst at going over the top, and that's what
Really.
I am not a fan of. There's movies because they're always so far top, and
You're not kidding.
um,
Aquaman was
oh
fun
gosh,
enough, but you cannot pay me enough money to watch Justice League. Uh,
which yeah, I feel like Justice one of the better DC movies in terms of not going too far over the top, but
really.
um, the original Spider-Man from like 2002 and or what year was that? 2002? I think it was 2002.
Right.
And then Spider-Man 2 from 2004. They were pretty good at not going too far over the top. Like X2 from way back in the day, I
Mm-hmm.
think did a good job of not going too far over the top. And then like by the time we got to Spider-Man 3, the third Tobey Maguire
Oh
Spider-Man,
yeah.
they just went way too far over the top, and it was like
And then
just
they kept going with the Amazing Spider-Man 1 and 2.
yeah, yeah, for
Yeah.
sure. Those were
And then
I like Homecoming quite a bit. I feel like
yeah,
they
I brought it back down to a more quote unquote realistic sense, but
and it's just it was executed better as well. I mean, they
right.
definitely did some big things in it, but it was just executed better, so they were able to get away with it. And with the Marvel universe in general, the Marvel Cinematic Universe, I feel like they've sort of figured out how to execute the really super over the top stuff and do it well.
Right.
But it's a hard thing to pull off and keep it feeling like keep the verisimilitude high. It's just like I don't know. A lot of movies can't pull it off, and DC has trouble with it.
I will
Like
s-
Spider-Man 3 had trouble with it. X-Men 3 from back in the day had trouble with it. They kind of went too big at the end of that. So
I will say
um,
the perfect model for a superhero movie. There's no better superhero movie than Into the Spider-Verse in my opinion. Like that was the uh,
oh my gosh! So
best
I'm
Spider-Man.
still looking forward to that because that's what we were going to watch that.
Okay,
That was the
you
plan.
haven't
But
seen that yet?
I have not seen it yet. My buddy went with his dog. to go watch it,
Yeah,
and so
you
he was going to double down and watch it again with me, and I was like, dude, I don't want
yeah.
to make you watch the movie twice
No,
if you don't
no,
have to, so
I
we'll
saw it
watch something
twice,
else.
and you owe it to yourself.
To see it twice?
To see it at least once. I think it's just one of those movies that you just gotta see before anyone's gotta see it before they die, if they're interested in animation, of course. Like I don't think I don't. I just think like if you don't appreciate good looking artwork, you might not care for it. But like visually, it's by far the most stunning thing I've seen in theaters in a long
Mm-hmm.
time.
All right, I'm going. I'm
It
going. I
Yeah.
caught the
doesn't. I haven't
preview.
seen.
I forgot where I was. I think I caught, and I thought it was amazing. I loved the art style from
Oh
the
yeah.
short clip that I saw. So very excited for that. So that is probably the next thing that I will see.
Yeah.
Either that or maybe I'll be lucky enough to go on a date night with my wife, and I know she doesn't want to watch that, so we'll
Really.
catch something else. But
I think she'll regret not seeing it, or if she did see it, she'd be glad she did. But
she's into the Marvel movies and stuff, but it's
it's not
I think
MCU. I think
animation. I don't know if she'd like an animated movie. Well, I can't say that. She likes Pixar movies. I don't know. Maybe she would.
I don't
Maybe I'll
know.
try to convince her. We'll see.
I can see it might be overwhelming for some, but just tell her that you've heard good reviews, and maybe she'll be convinced. But I do know it's my favorite superhero movie. And Christian, have you found what you're looking for?
About.
All right, you're about to find it, or could you have some
Oh yeah,
information
it's in
for
the
us?
chat.
Oh, it's
It
in the
is in the chat.
I didn't even see that.
That is the sexiest gentleman alive.
You're not kidding. He, I should.
he's
Let me see if I can find. I'm just going to send a picture of Oakley Dokley real fast to combat that.
This is Cardinal Copia.
Cardinal Copia.
All right.
And believe it or not, he's the quirky, funny one out of all of the personas that lead singer has had. For real, like that in previous incarnations, they come in like Pope forms. There's Papa Emeritus 1, 2, and 3, and then Cardinal Copia was not quite old enough to become a Pope, so he was like, oh, well, okay.
Guys,
And
this band is real.
Oakley dokley. Howdly doodly. That is amazing.
Yeah.
I was finding
What
them.
a
Gosh.
Oh my God.
what a
The
world we live
creativity
in.
of people is so epic. I mean, it's just people come up with so many different things. It's
Well, look at it. Like 5 guys agreed to do that. Like they all liked the idea enough.
That's
guys,
amazing.
I mean, hey, more power to them. That's it's so. I'm trying to think. It's like it's contradictory and hilarious all at the same
'cause
time. So it's just
Ned Flanders is like this Christian goody character. Yeah, I love it.
They're real. The White Wine Spritzer is a song. We're coming for your.
Are you
We're
reading off?
coming for you, neighborinos.
I'm
I can't right now.
gonna I know I will end up checking out Oakley Dokley. I know now.
Little dude.
So now I have some music to look forward to. Thank you very much,
Now we
Christian.
have,
I'm sorry, this was John that put this forth. Right?
yeah, I'm the green.
That was John. Oh my God.
I'm the green face on the
Yeah.
chat, and then Christian's the emoticon, and
I'm the fuck it emoticon.
yeah,
Yeah.
and I'm the face from the Action 52 video game.
Nice.
Yeah, that's the best thing to come out of that whole game is this face. All 52 games, and all they did right was this face.
Oh my God.
Any-
Well,
yeah.
Is that like a WarioWare type thing? Like
No, Action 52 is like a bootleg NES game. If you've heard of Cheetamin, or it was
okay.
like back in the day, it was like a $200 cartridge. You'd see an advertisement for.
Oh my gosh! Yes, I remember seeing that. Yes.
Yeah,
yes.
yeah, There's like one game called Ooze or whatever. One of those. No, it's one of the games towards the bottom of the list, and like
Okay.
you start it off, and all you see in the background is this face repeated over and over again. And I just thought that'd make a really good profile picture.
Heck
And
yeah.
yeah, what do you know? Here I am. Any closing notes, gentlemen?
That is such an obscure reference. I love it.
I know that's how you make a good. Obscure references are good for like little personality things on social media.
Absolutely.
That's why, yeah, it's almost as if a competition. Uh,
To find the most
to
obscure
be
yet
the most
recognizable reference.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Or like, can you recognize my obscure reference that I put on my
Yeah,
social
yeah,
media?
yeah, and that's
Yeah.
how you make friends. Like I used to have like a profile picture of Renton from Eureka 7, and like people would notice that on YouTube, reply to my comments and be like, "You're a cool guy," and it was it's always really nice because like there's got to be a billion Naruto profile
Right.
pictures out there and stuff,
Right.
but I mean, or Mario and stuff like that. But I mean, like, there's nothing wrong with either way. But again, if you have something obscure yet recognizable, you're sure to just come across just the right friends.
It's
And
unique. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, people
Yeah.
people will remember you for it. Uh,
Oh yeah.
I was going to ask. I think it's time we start wrapping up. Thank you again, Jeremy, for this amazing episode of the show. I'm very excited to publish it. Um,
Yeah, man. I appreciate you guys chatting with me, John and Christian, and it's been awesome. I'm always down for a good conversation. So
Yeah, yeah. No, you were perfect. Any closing notes before we wrap up?
This might
uh,
have been our longest one yet, and I'm
Let me
very
see.
proud of it.
My well, there is a 2 hour. Oh, we gotta wrap up soon, guys, because my longest episode was episode 9, and I had to trim it down because there's a 2 hour cap on Wii Video, so I can't publish anything
ooh,
over 2 hours.
only 6 minutes to go. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, just to close, I want to let anybody that is a gamer and still has a Wii U hooked up. SwapFire is actually available again for free right now. It's the first time in 2 years that it's been out there. Just basically trying to reach more people with the first game, and it's an indie game. It's definitely was a labor of love, and it's kind of a new direction. We the way that we think about the game is that we wanted to get this mechanic out there. We want to do a cool thing, a few cool levels, and get you laughing with your friends on the couch. It's 5 player multiplayer.
Bring back that
Um,
old feeling of
yeah, and it's totally a throwback to an older N64 style of
an
gameplay.
old era of for me. You keep on referencing 1964. When I look at SwapFire, I close my eyes and I see Halo. So
Oh, awesome!
Nice.
That's cool.
Nice.
yeah.
We played a heck of a lot of Halo during the same time period, or a little bit after as well. And so,
Oh yeah.
any of those games where you had your buddies and sort of free online, and there were a lot of good memories,
Oh
and
yeah.
that's just what we wanted to pay forward. That's where I had the best time playing video games, and wanted to pay that forward. We are very hopefully close to being able to release some good news about progress on the Switch,
I'm
front.
looking forward to
Um,
updates on that because I uh I want to see what it's going to look like. This more polished version of SwapFire you're working on. I'm excited for it.
I'm so excited. We should have some new stuff coming up here soon, and hopefully some good news just on the development front. So I can't say anything about it yet, just because there's nothing concrete that I have. But I can say that I was sparked to try to get SwapFire out there a little bit more.
Hmm.
People might have noticed that I shared some news recently. Obviously, I found your message on Twitter, and
Oh
so
yeah.
I've been circling back to it.
Do you think?
We had our trials and our tribulations, and definitely some struggles in trying to come back to do this second game. We got a little bit of good news. It sort of gave me some motivation, and so we're doing a little bit of promotion and trying to find some other players. Hopefully, I know there's going to be some more YouTube content coming from Nintendo reviewer and a couple of other people. So just let people know. No, we're never going to give up the good fight, and we're going to get this game done.
Yeah.
We're going to do it. It's just
I wish you
it's
I wish you a world of luck, man. But
appreciated.
Yeah.
if you're really lucky the way I would love to see Swapfire 2 revealed is I want to. I really hope you're lucky enough to get it in some kind of Nindies Direct.
Oh my gosh, it'd be a dream come true. It'd be a dream come true.
Yeah, that would be really
So,
cool to see. But we're sneaking up on that 2 hour mark here. It's only a few more minutes before video won't let me render the whole thing. So I'm gonna go ahead and sign off. This has been episode 14 with our pal Jeremy Alessi. Thank you.
Thank
thank
you
you
so
again.
much, good sir.
Mm-hmm.
Been a good time.
Christian, would you like to sign us off?
As always, low gangsters, please have a safe rest of your night.
You almost went an episode without a Logan Paul reference. Almost. Very
I
close.
I almost did, and it would have been sad.
You just couldn't do it.
I tried my hardest, John, and it just came out.
Well, it's all right, Christian. You're just being yourself. All right.
Man.
Thank you very much. Subscribe, hit the like button. There'll be links in the description for Swapfire and Jeremy.
But
Alessi,
remember,
Twitter, so you can follow them there for updates. And Christian, I'm still gonna let you have the last words.
just remember, you can't access the description unless you subscribe.